What if I told you that right in the very seed of a limitation, a challenge, a shadow, a weak spot, holds the seed of your greatest gift? Every single person in this room has a shadow, a challenge, a limitation, a weak spot, a part of ourselves that we don't really always present to the world. And not just every single person in this room, but every single person on this planet. Everybody's going through something that we know nothing about, so compassion is key. Let me start with sharing my journey of when my greatest limitation presented itself. 5 years ago. Here's me, happy-go-lucky, hanging out with my dog, cruising on my bike through the Venice canals. I started noticing that my hearing was decreasing rapidly. And I spent a family meal with my parents and my brother, and we were talking about it, and I was saying, I can't pick up on words as like I used to. And my brother actually started saying that he'd noticed the same symptoms. So we went for a hearing checkup, and I'll never forget that day for the rest of my life. I walked out of that doctor's office, and he said that our results were extremely concerning. And after extensive amount of testing, our diagnosis was that we have a hereditary hearing disorder, which is most likely a mutated gene between our parents. It's progressive, meaning that it's getting worse. And it's incurable. So essentially, we were diagnosed with a hereditary hearing disorder that meant that we were going deaf and there was nothing that we could do about it. I'm 25 years old. What was guaranteed, what felt like was guaranteed, what my life was all lined up for me, everything then started being in question. The thing that actually was the joy of my human experience, which was socializing and connecting with other people, music events, community, started to be the very seed of what felt like a very new phenomenon called social anxiety. As my hearing progressively got worse, it felt like I was standing in a puppet show. And all I was hearing was, I got really good at smiling and nodding and had no idea what was going on in the room. I started feeling really isolated. And I could be in a room full of people, and I never felt more alone. And yes, people could empathize with my experience, but no one truly understood. It did also lead me into some very interesting situations. I remember being in a room with my friend, and she turned to me and she said, "Gosh, the insects in the room are driving me nuts." I thought she told me that the incest in the room was driving her nuts. You can imagine we went on completely different pages for the rest of the night. Things were a little awkward. Because of this new social anxiety that I was feeling at the core of my being, I stopped going out. There was no joy for me there anymore. I stayed alone and home, and I didn't have to face off with my hearing loss. And something that I loved doing when I was a kid, but I haven't done it for so long, was drawing. So I started drawing. I had a little piece of paper, and I did pencil sketches, and eventually I went to canvas. And eventually I started drawing a world of beauty. Everything became my canvas. Because when I was painting or creating, I didn't have to face off with the reality that I was going deaf. My canvases got bigger and bigger. And then this is when angel number one came into my life. His name was Amir Magal, and he had created a body art marker pen, all about the tool of human connection. Now you can imagine this definitely grabbed my attention, because it was all about human connection and art. Human connection, which I felt like I completely lost, and art, which is something that had just become my world. And so essentially it's a marker pen that you draw on yourself, or draw on others. So I started painting on myself, and I became my own canvas. And when friends would come visit me as I hermited in my apartment, I started drawing on them too. Eventually, over time of drawing on other people, I realized that actually, not all is lost. 93% of human communication is nonverbal. So it's like looking at an iceberg. We've got 77% above the water that our five senses pick up on. There's 93% of the iceberg that sits below the surface level of the water that most of us are not really even tapping into. I realized that actually words lie all the time. Energy never does. Remember that feeling when you picked up on something when you first met them and something was off, but you didn't listen to your intuition and then later you found out that you should have listened to it? That's that 93% I'm talking about. I realized that actually, through connecting with tribal markers, I didn't even need to use a single word. And my connection was restored. So this is me hanging out again with my pup. I never left home without my handy pouch of tribal markers. And in a room full of people when my social anxiety was at its peak, I'd pull out my markers and I'd create art on someone. And the human connection was way deeper than the human connection I was even experiencing before my hearing loss. Leaving myself with the question, was I really even connecting before? So Albert Einstein once said, energy can never be created nor destroyed, only changed in form. So if my energy was no longer being sent towards my hearing, it's got to go somewhere else. And I started realizing that it was actually being funneled into my extrasensory perception of feeling. And Maya Angelou once said, I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. And through being able to draw and create art on others and restoring my human connection, I left something with them, a piece of artwork, realizing that actually giving and receiving is the same energy. And even though I was long gone out of the room, my energy of my gift still lingered. So this sort of excited me a little bit. The very thing that started to scare me the most, actually when I leaned into it, there was gold on the other side. And because of my hearing loss, I didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what was going to happen in 10 years' time. So my fear being in the driving seat of all the things that I wanted to do, but I was far too afraid to do, it didn't seem to make any more sense. So I went into the core of the things that scared me the most, and I made a list in my journal. One of the things, shaving my head. So I did it. And for most people, I look completely crazy. But for me, it seemed to make sense. Realizing actually, on the other side of the thing that scared me the most, it's the very thing that set me free. And so people said to me, oh, you've actually lost your mind at this point. And I'm thinking, I haven't lost my mind. I know exactly where it is. I just placed it over there for a second, start living with my heart. Because I have not got anything guaranteed but this moment. For the rest of my life, all I have is right now. Another thing that would scare me was to travel solo. So I packed my bags and I went to Nepal. I went backpacking through the Himalayas. And I walked through the streets of Kathmandu barefoot. I bought paint supplies and went to the orphanages and connected with the children. I painted murals. I brought beauty to places where there was just gray walls. And realizing actually that when I was in service, I was no longer suffering. And I didn't speak the same language as any of these people, but service and love is a universal language. I then found myself in the heart of the Amazon jungle studying with a 2,000-year-old lineage called the Shipibo tribe, learning all about the intelligence of the plant worlds, the master plant teachers. And then this is when angel number 2 came into my life. A book called The Gene Keys, created by a man named Richard Rudd, who is an incredible human being. Now, according to the Gene Keys, this is a technology that helps us to access the dormant potential within our DNA. So there are 7.8 billion different people on this planet. There are 7.8 billion different realities happening simultaneously. Our reality is a byproduct of the lens in which we see life through. Our lens is created by all of the stories that have happened up until this point and how we have responded to them. So there's a bunch of people in this room right now, and all of you are having a completely different experience with the same talk. Some of you could be thinking, wow, she's a hippie off the deep end. She's not even wearing any shoes. And some of you can be genuinely inspired by what I've got to share today. Your perception creates your reality. And so according to the Gene Keys, there's 3 different frequencies that we can operate as human beings. We have the shadow. Life is happening to me. I am a victim of my external circumstances. I blame outside of myself as to why things the way that they are. There's nothing I can do about it, because when I blame something external, I give all my power away. I am living someone else's story, and I am not fulfilled. There's the gift. Life is happening for me. I may not understand it in this moment, but 100% of the time, it's worked out. And the reason why this is happening for me is to prepare me for something even greater than what is present right now. And then there's the city, the clearest lenses. These are the sages, the gurus, the people that have left legacies on this planet long after they have passed. This is where synchronicity becomes a default. Life is happening through me. I am a conduit of the divine will. So when I studied into the Gene Keys, you can create your own individual hologenetic profile. And it's created from 2 technologies, the I Ching and astrology. And when I was diving deep into this text, wanting to understand what is my superpower on the other side of my challenge, I saw that I have deafness in my chart. I'll never forget that moment, sitting in my little cabin in the forest, open up my book and realize that there was a superpower hidden in this challenge. I had been given a truth filter, the ability to feel energy and read far beyond the words. Neil Strauss once said, how you respond to the inevitable pain of existence determines the happiness and the fulfillment of your life. And the Dalai Lama once said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And I like to add a little bit onto that. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering is a byproduct of resisting what is. And my dear sister Brianna says, the most sacred thing is what is. Because remember, 100% of the time, it's worked out up until this point. And then this is when I came across the story of Beethoven. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with Beethoven's music, of course. And yet, are you familiar that Beethoven was 100% deaf? He created some of the most incredible music that didn't just touch people's hearts, it made people feel something on the core of their being. This man translated vibration into music that left a legacy long after he had passed. His story reinforced what I was discovering and realizing, that our lenses create our reality. We think 60,000 thoughts a day. Whew. And for the most part, they're disempowering thoughts. Our thoughts are like a frame around our artwork. All of you are an exquisite piece of artwork. And now you take that piece of artwork and you put it in the garage, behind the sofa, with a blanket covered over it, covered in dust. Now it's lost all of its value. Now you take that same piece of artwork and you put it in the Getty Museum, with a gold frame around it, a red tape in front of it, and you can't stand 5 feet in front of it. Now it's worth $10 million. Same piece of artwork, different frame. What story are you telling yourself around your limitation, your weakness, that Achilles heel? Because the story is the perception that creates your reality. We can either be a victim of circumstance, or we can be a creator of circumstance. But if it wasn't for my deafness, I wouldn't have discovered all of these gifts. I'm curious, what is your deafness? What is your challenge? What is your Achilles heel? What is your limitation? Because it might just well be the greatest gift and your service to the world. And if we want to heal the planet, the division that's happening, where everyone's pointing the blame and hoping that something outside of us is going to save us, we're fooling ourselves. The only way we're going to see a shift on this planet is if we take ownership of our internal reality. Self-awareness is one of the greatest gifts you could give yourself. Because I'm standing here today telling you this story from the core of my wound. I'm 70% deaf right now. And you can imagine with the masks, things got really tough. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years from now. But what I can carry with me is the shift of perception that life is happening for me, and I'm always looking for the gift in the challenge. And so I want to share with you today a gift that I found. I was so afraid to sing in public before my hearing diagnosis. The thought of singing and expressing myself shut me down. My body would physically shake, my face would go red, my palms would go sweaty. They're kind of sweaty right now as well. And I let fear limit my self-expression. But because nothing was guaranteed, and I didn't even know if I was going to be able to hear my own voice ever again, I started singing. And just like Beethoven, I don't hear the sound, I feel it. And so I want to invite you, don't hear this, feel it. Because I believe that the voice is the vibration of our soul. And so I invite you, for your soul, to meet mine. May we liberate ourselves so that we can liberate the world. And so it is. Thank you.